Hello, my dear friends, and welcome back. Tonight we travel to an ancient place, quiet, elegant, and dangerously secretive. They call it Silverpine Abbey, a holy sanctuary surrounded by towering pine, where footsteps echo like confessions and the past never truly leaves. But tonight, a maid has vanished. No screams, no struggle, no witnesses, only silence, and a truth someone is desperate to bury. So, settle in, get comfortable, and let us begin The Vanishing Maid of Silverpine Abbey. Chapter 1. Arrival at Silverpine Abbey. Silverpine Abbey did not welcome strangers. It merely tolerated them, like a cold cathedral tolerates sunlight, allowing it to enter for a moment before swallowing it whole. The road leading up to the abbey was narrow, flanked by towering pine trees that stood like silent sentries, their branches knit together overhead, turning the afternoon into a permanent twilight. Even the wind seemed quieter here, as if the forest had imposed rules upon the air itself. Etienne Parmentier sat alone in the back seat of a hired car, hands folded neatly over his cane, eyes fixed ahead. To anyone watching him, he might have appeared calm, almost indifferent. Yet, in his mind, every detail was being filed, measured, and given its place. He noted how the driver avoided looking at the abbey. He noted how the wheels slowed instinctively as they neared the outer gate. He noted the scent in the air, pine resin, damp earth, and something older, something like extinguished candle wax. The driver cleared his throat. "Sir," he said, voice strained, "that's as far as I go?" Parmentier's gaze shifted slightly to the side window. Through the pines, the abbey rose from the mist like a memory. Gothic spires, dark stone walls, narrow windows with stained glass that looked black from a distance. It wasn't merely old, it was ancient, as though it had always been there and always would be. "You do not enter?" Parmentier asked politely. The driver's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. "No one enters without reason, and even then, not happily." Parmentier smiled faintly. "Then I suppose I am fortunate. I have reason." The driver gave a short laugh that held no humor. "If you say so." Parmentier stepped out of the car and straightened his coat. The air was colder than it should have been for the season, an unnatural chill that slid under the skin. He paid the driver, and the man all but threw the coins into his pocket before reversing away from the gate like a man escaping judgment. Now alone, Parmentier approached the entrance. The outer gate was wrought iron, tall and ornamented with religious symbols, crosses, thorns, angels with stern expressions. At the center sat a worn emblem, a silver pine tree, etched so deeply it seemed more scar than decoration. He touched the iron lightly, cold. Not merely from weather, cold like a thing that resisted warmth itself. A small bell rope hung beside the gate. Parmentier pulled it. A distant chime echoed, then silence. For nearly a full minute, nothing happened. And in that minute, Parmentier realized something crucial. Silverpine Abbey did not respond quickly because it wished the visitor to feel time stretching, waiting, doubting, questioning their own presence. At last, the gate creaked open. A man stood there, tall, gaunt, wrapped in a heavy black robe. His head was shaved, his face pale as parchment. His eyes were not hostile, but they were not kind either. They were the eyes of a man trained to hide emotion. "Mr. Parmentier," the monk said softly. Parmentier inclined his head. "Yes." The monk studied him carefully, as if verifying that the man in front of him truly belonged to the name he carried. "You have been expected," the monk said. "This," Parmentier thought, "is never said in a place without secrets." "I am honored," Parmentier replied. The monk motioned inward. "Follow, do not wander." Parmentier stepped through. Immediately the gate closed behind him with a heavy clang like the final note in a prison door. Inside the abbey grounds, the air grew even colder. The stone path wound through a courtyard where statues watched in solemn poses, saints, martyrs, angels, with their hands raised in warning. Ivy crawled across the walls like veins. The monk led him to the main doors, enormous oak slabs darkened with age, carved with scenes of judgment and confession. The doors opened, warm candlelight poured out, but the warmth did not reach the heart. Parmentier entered. The abbey interior was grand yet severe, tall arches, stone floors, endless corridors that branched like ribs. Candles lined walls in iron sconces, each flame trembling as though nervous. A woman stood waiting in the entrance hall. She was not dressed as a nun. Instead, she wore the uniform of a household servant, dark dress, crisp white apron, hair pinned tightly. Her face was composed, but there was a tightness around her eyes that Parmentier recognized immediately. Not grief, not anger, fear disguised as professionalism. "Mr. Parmentier," she said, "I am Sister Administrator Elowen. I manage the Abbey's practical affairs." Parmentier's eyes narrowed slightly at the title, Sister Administrator, a creative way to avoid admitting she was neither fully religious nor fully staff. "Enchanté," Parmentier replied. She did not smile. "You were invited by Abbot Alaric," she said. "Please come." As she walked, the monk vanished into another corridor, like a shadow evaporating. Elowen led Parmentier deeper into the abbey. As they passed rooms and hallways, Parmentier observed several things. 1. The abbey was quiet, but not peaceful. There was tension in the silence, as if people were holding their breath. 2. There were more servants than expected, but they moved too quickly, too nervously, eyes lowered. 3. Several doors were locked. Old heavy locks, recently used, fresh scratches. He glanced at Elowen. "Many locks for a holy place." Elowen's voice remained flat. "The abbey protects itself." "From what?" Elowen's steps faltered, just once. Then she continued walking. "From scandal," she said. "Ah, not protection from thieves or storms. Protection from truth." They reached the abbot's office. Elowen knocked once, then opened the door without waiting. Inside sat Abbot Alaric, an elderly man with a long white beard and eyes too sharp for his age. He rose slowly as Parmentier entered. "Mr. Parmentier," the abbot said, voice smooth. "You came." Parmentier bowed politely. "You requested, Father." The abbot gestured toward a chair. "Sit, please." Parmentier sat, crossing his ankles neatly. Elowen remained by the door like a sentry, hands clasped. The abbot studied Parmentier, as if measuring him. "You are known for discretion." Parmentier smiled faintly. "I am known for conclusions." The abbot's fingers tightened on his desk. "Then I will be direct." He leaned forward. "A maid has vanished from Silverpine Abbey." Parmentier did not blink. "Vanished?" "Yes." The word hung like smoke. The abbot continued. "Her name was Lisa Morel. She served here for 2 years. She was obedient, quiet, strong." Elowen's eyes flicked downward at the mention of the name. Parmentier noticed. "When did she disappear?" Parmentier asked. 2 nights ago," the abbot replied. "After evening duties." "Any screams?" "No." "Any blood?" "No." "Any witnesses?" The abbot hesitated, only a half-breath. "None," he said. Parmentier's gaze sharpened. Hesitation was always a witness. Elowen spoke suddenly, voice tense. "The abbey sleeps early. Most corridors are empty by night." Parmentier looked at her gently. "Most corridors." Elowen went still. Parmentier turned back to the abbot. "Why invite me instead of the police?" The abbot's expression hardened. "The police are clumsy. They do not understand reputation." Parmentier nodded slowly. "And you fear scandal?" The abbot did not deny it. Then quietly he added, "There is one more thing." Parmentier waited. The abbot's eyes darkened. "The corridor she vanished from was locked." Parmentier's voice softened, but his mind brightened. "A locked corridor," he repeated. "Yes." Elowen's knuckles turned white. Parmentier leaned slightly forward. "Then, Father, this is not simply a missing maid?" He paused deliberately. "This is a planned vanishing." Chapter 2. The maid who never returned. That evening, Parmentier refused dinner. Not out of rudeness, he thanked Elowen politely and asked that tea be brought to his room instead. But Parmentier understood something about places like Silverpine Abbey. Secrets did not reveal themselves at the dining table. They revealed themselves in corridors, in shadows, in the quiet moments when someone forgot to wear their mask. His room was on the eastern wing, cold stone walls, narrow bed, a single candle, and a window overlooking the pine forest. At 9, Elowen brought tea herself. She set the tray down with careful hands. Parmentier watched her. "Miss Elowen?" he said. Her posture stiffened. "Yes?" "You are frightened." Elowen's eyes flicked to the door, checking whether anyone listened. "I'm not." Parmentier smiled faintly. In my profession, denial is as meaningful as confession. Elowen's lips tightened. You shouldn't stay long, Mr. Parmentier. And yet, he said gently, you want me to solve it. Elowen's breath caught. For a moment, her professional mask slipped. She began. Then she stopped. In the Abbey corridor outside, footsteps echoed, slow, measured. Elowen stepped back as if the sound could touch her. A shadow passed the crack beneath the door. Then silence returned. Elowen whispered, Everyone here is watched. Parmentier asked softly, By whom? She shook her head violently. Don't ask me that. She left quickly, almost fleeing. Parmentier stared at the closed door. Watched. In an abbey? He sipped tea, thinking. At 10, he left his room. He moved through the corridor quietly, cane tapping softly, not because he needed it, but because it gave a rhythm to his movement like a steady heartbeat. He walked toward the Western Service corridor, the one the abbot described as locked. 2 monks stood guarding it. They wore robes, but their stance was not spiritual. It was defensive. Parmentier approached calmly. One monk stepped forward, palm raised. This section is restricted. Parmentier nodded. I understand. That is why I wish to see it. The monk's eyes hardened. No one enters. Parmentier tilted his head. No one enters, but someone can vanish inside? The monk stiffened. He glanced toward the other monk. Then, reluctantly, he said, We received orders. From whom? Parmentier wanted to ask, but the abbey was full of orders that came from shadows. Parmentier stepped back politely. I see, he said. Then I will observe the corridor from here. The monks frowned, but they could not object to observation. Parmentier stood before the locked service door for several minutes, simply listening. The door itself was heavy oak, reinforced with iron bands. The lock was old, but the chain was newer. Fresh metal, recently installed. He leaned down slightly and saw something that made his blood turn cold. A faint scratch mark near the bottom of the door. Not the scratch of age, the scratch of dragging, something heavy, something pulled across the floor. A body, a trunk, a person resisting. Parmentier straightened. This wasn't a romantic vanishing, this was relocation, control. The maid didn't disappear into air. She was moved, hidden. And the abbey's silence was not confusion, it was cooperation. He turned away from the corridor, slowly, so the monks would not sense his urgency. Then he stopped, because he heard it again. Footsteps, not the monks, not his own cane. These footsteps came from behind, barely audible but deliberate. Someone was following him. Parmentier continued walking as if unaware. He reached a side arch. Then, suddenly he turned. No one, only candlelight and stone. But he had learned long ago that being watched didn't always mean being seen. It meant being measured. He walked back toward his room with calm steps. Yet in his mind, the case had already taken shape. A locked corridor, a missing maid, fresh chain on an old door, drag marks near the floor, staff too frightened to speak, and above all, a silence in the abbey that sounded less like faith and more like fear. Chapter 3. The Locked Corridor. The next morning, Silverpine Abbey appeared calmer, but Parmentier had learned long ago that calm was not the absence of danger. It was the moment before danger decided where to strike. A thin, pale sunlight filtered through the pines like reluctant mercy. It touched the abbey's stone walls, but did not warm them. Even the stained glass windows looked like they were holding their breath. Parmentier stood in the courtyard just after breakfast, watching the routine. A monk swept the same patch of stones 3 times, though it was already clean. A servant crossed the courtyard carrying folded linens with unnecessary speed. Sister Administrator Elowen emerged from a side doorway, glanced around, and vanished again, like someone checking whether the world was watching. Everything in the abbey moved with one unspoken rule. Do not linger, do not question, do not be noticed. And yet the abbey itself noticed everything. Parmentier walked toward the western wing. He did not go straight to the locked service corridor, not yet. Instead, he moved as if the abbey belonged to him, as if doors opening or closing would be natural. Events around his path. He passed the chapel, he passed the library, he passed the kitchen corridor, he listened. Silverpine Abbey had its own soundscape, subtle, layered, a soft echo from a distant hallway, a faint clink of keys behind stone, the whisper of robes brushing against corners, and occasionally A pause, not a pause of silence. A pause of people becoming quiet when Parmentier drew near. It was then that he realized something deeply important. The abbey was not simply fearful of scandal, it was fearful of one specific truth. When he arrived again at the locked service corridor, the same two monks stood guard. They looked less patient today. One monk, tall, sharp-nosed, eyes cold, stepped forward. "This corridor remains restricted, monsieur." Parmentier smiled faintly. "And remains interesting." The monk did not smile. "You have been granted hospitality, not authority." Parmentier lowered his head in polite surrender. "Forgive me, I do not mean to offend." He turned away as if leaving. But after 3 steps, he stopped and looked down at the floor. "Curious," he murmured. Both monks stiffened. Parmentier bent and gently touched the stone tile near the base of the locked door. It was clean. Too clean. No dust, no grit, not even the faint residue of candle ash that existed everywhere else in the abbey. Someone had scrubbed this spot recently, scrubbed it like a crime scene. Parmentier straightened. "You clean well," he said casually to the monks. The sharp-nosed monk snapped, "Move along." Parmentier did. But as he walked away, his mind tightened into precision. The drag scratch he'd seen last night may have been older, yet the cleaning was new. Which meant, 1, something had been dragged here recently, or 2, someone feared that someone else might discover traces. Parmentier returned to the library. If he could not enter the corridor, he would enter the abbey's memory. The library was ancient and severe, its shelves rising like dark cliffs. The scent of old paper hung in the air, blended with beeswax and damp stone. It was a place designed for quiet thinking. Yet, even here, Parmentier felt eyes behind him. A monk sat at a desk, copying text by hand. The monk did not look up, but Parmentier sensed alertness in the stillness. Parmentier walked along the shelves until he found what he needed, an old abbey layout ledger, bound in thick, cracked leather. He opened it carefully, architectural sketches, records of repairs, old renovations marked in faded ink. And there, near the western wing, he found an annotation. Service passage, decommissioned, sealed after incident. 1892. Parmentier's eyes narrowed. An incident in 1892. Sealed passage, locked corridor, missing maid. He read further, slowly. The handwriting grew faint, as if the writer had been ashamed. A young novice disappeared. No explanation, only prayer and silence. Corridor locked thereafter. May God forgive our weakness. Parmentier closed the book gently. He did not need to read beyond that, because now the abbey was not just hiding a maid. It was repeating an old sin, and repetition was always deliberate. That afternoon, as Parmentier crossed the courtyard, he noticed Elowen standing near the chapel entrance. She held a clipboard, pretending to count supplies. But her eyes were not on the supplies, they were on him. Parmentier approached slowly. "Elowen," he said gently. She flinched at her name, as if names were dangerous here. "Yes, sir." "The service corridor," Parmentier said quietly, "was sealed after an incident in 1892. Her face lost color. "You knew," Parmentier continued. Elowen swallowed. "That was long ago." "The abbey remembers," Parmentier said. "And so do you." Elowen's lips trembled. Parmentier leaned in slightly, voice softer. "Tell me one thing. When Lisa vanished, did you hear anything?" Elowen stared at him. For a moment, the abbey around them seemed to lean closer. Then she whispered, "I heard a door." Parmentier's eyes sharpened. "Which door?" Elowen shook her head, terrified. "I don't know, but it wasn't the corridor door. It was deeper, like stone sliding." Parmentier felt the air turn cold. Stone sliding meant hidden mechanisms, old architecture, secret passages. He had just opened his mouth to ask more when a bell rang. Not the chapel bell, a smaller, sharper bell, a servant bell. Elowen's head snapped toward it like a hunted animal sensing a whip. "I must go," she whispered. Parmentier caught her arm gently. "Elowen," he said, "if you do not speak soon, someone will make sure you never speak." Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want to bring you here," she said. "I begged the abbot not to." Parmentier's voice turned grave. "Why did he then?" Elowen's lips parted. Then she said the words like poison. "Because Lisa knew something about him, and—" Before Parmentier could ask what, Elowen pulled away and hurried inside. Parmentier stood in the courtyard alone, Wind moved through the pines with a hush like a warning, and somewhere behind the chapel walls, something old seemed to shift. Chapter 4, A Whisper Behind the Chapel Wall. That night, Parmentier did not sleep. He sat on the edge of his narrow bed, candle burning low, and listened to the abbey. Every building had a pulse. Silverpine Abbey's pulse was slow, but never steady. Sometimes footsteps passed his door. Sometimes silence lasted too long. Sometimes he heard a faint murmur, like a conversation held behind stone. Near midnight he rose. He moved through the corridor like shadow, cane silent now, held in his hand instead of tapped. His destination was clear. The chapel. If stones slid, it was not in the kitchens, it was not in the dormitories, it was in the oldest part of the abbey, and the oldest part was sacred. The chapel door was ajar. Parmentier paused, listening. No voices, only candle flame crackling faintly. He stepped inside. The chapel was vast and dim, lined with tall pillars and stained glass that looked like sleeping eyes. Candles burned at the altar, their glow weak under the towering darkness. And the air felt disturbed, not by wind, by movement. Parmentier walked slowly along the side wall where confessional booths stood like small wooden prisons. Then he stopped, because he heard it, a whisper, not a human whisper, a whisper of stone, like something rubbing. He leaned closer to the wall. The whisper came again, faint, deliberate. Parmentier lowered his ear. He could now hear breath. Someone was on the other side. He stepped back slightly and scanned the wall. Old stone, carved with modest religious patterns, but one section near the far corner looked subtly different. Not newer, just cleaner, as if it had been touched many times. Parmentier reached out and pressed his palm gently against it. Cold, he pressed harder. Nothing. But then his fingers found something, a groove, a tiny groove under the carving, almost invisible. Parmentier's eyes narrowed, a latch disguised as decoration. He shifted his hand slightly and pushed. At first nothing happened, then a faint click, and the stone wall moved. Not much, only a fraction, like a breath. But enough. Parmentier's heart did not race. It settled, because certainty was always calmer than doubt. He widened the opening carefully. A narrow gap revealed darkness beyond, and the smell of damp earth. A hidden passage. Parmentier lifted his candle and stepped inside. The passage was tight, carved through stone, leading downward. Each step echoed like confession. He moved slowly, letting the candlelight search the walls. Then he stopped. A sound came from below, a soft scrape, a deliberate shuffle. Someone else was in this passage. Parmentier extinguished the candle with his fingers, plunging himself into darkness. He waited. The scrape came again, closer now. A key clinked softly, metal against metal. Then a whispering voice drifted upward, a voice praying or pretending to pray. Parmentier held his breath. A shadow rose toward him, someone climbing. When the figure reached the bend in the stairs, moonlight from a small vent struck their face for a moment. Parmentier saw a woman, a nun. Her hood was up, but her face was clear enough in the pale light to recognize fear in it. She held a ring of keys in one hand, and in the other, a folded piece of cloth. White cloth, like a maid's apron. The nun paused as if sensing something. Parmentier moved, fast. He stepped out from darkness and seized her wrist. The nun gasped and tried to scream, but Parmentier covered her mouth with his other hand, gentle but firm. "Quiet," he whispered, "or you will wake the abbey." Her eyes were enormous, wild. He loosened his hand from her mouth slowly. "You will not scream," he said softly, "because if you do, you will bring the very people you fear." The nun's breath trembled, then she nodded. Parmentier lowered his hand. "Good," he said. "Now tell me." He pointed to the cloth. "Where did you get that?" The nun's lips shook. Parmentier's voice hardened slightly. "Sister, a maid has vanished, and you are carrying her apron through a secret passage," the nun whispered. "I didn't hurt her. Where is she?" Tears spilled down the nun's cheeks. "She's alive." Parmentier felt a cold relief and a hotter anger. Alive meant imprisonment. He leaned closer. "Where is she kept?" The nun's eyes flicked downward into the passage, then upward toward the chapel. "She's below," the nun whispered, "in the old chamber." Parmentier's voice was very soft now, dangerously calm. "Who ordered it?" The nun squeezed her eyes shut. "I can't." Parmentier took the keys from her shaking hand one by one, letting them clink. softly. Then he said the line that made her break. "Would you like it to be Lysa next time? Or you?" The nun sobbed once, sharp and ugly, and the truth fell out. "The abbot," she whispered. Parmentier went still. "The abbot ordered it," the nun repeated, choking. He said she sinned. He said she would disgrace the abbey. He said silence was mercy." Parmentier's blood turned colder than the stone walls around them. Because corruption was expected in men like Strake. But corruption inside holiness, that was the kind that terrified towns into obedience. Parmentier asked, "Why did she vanish? What did she know?" The nun's voice became almost inaudible. "She saw what happens in the sealed corridor," she whispered. "She saw who goes there at night." Parmentier's eyes narrowed. "Who?" The nun's lips moved, but the name did not come out, because a sound interrupted them. From above in the chapel, a door creaked. Footsteps entered. Slow footsteps, deliberate footsteps, not rushed, not afraid. A figure walked with the calm of authority. The nun's face turned to absolute terror, and she whispered the final warning, "He is here." Parmentier extinguished all motion in his body, and together, in the cold throat of the abbey, they listened to the footsteps above them, as the chapel candles trembled like frightened witnesses. Chapter 5. The Abbot's Nervous Prayer. The footsteps above the chapel did not hurry. They did not stumble or hesitate the way an anxious man's steps do. No, these footsteps were slow, measured, and confident. The footsteps of someone who believed the abbey belonged to him, the way a king believes a throne belongs to blood. In the hidden passage below, Parmentier remained motionless, his body as still as the stone around him. The nun trembled beside him, her breath shaking in tiny bursts that scraped against the silence like sandpaper. Parmentier leaned toward her mouth, barely a whisper. "Name," he mouthed. The nun's eyes squeezed shut. Her lips formed a word silently, terrified even of sound. "Alaric, the abbot." Above them, the chapel door creaked again, then closed. The footsteps advanced and stopped. Then came something worse. A pause, not an empty pause, a listening pause. As if the abbot was standing perfectly still, letting silence confess for others. The nun's shoulders shuddered. A faint sob tried to rise. Parmentier placed 2 fingers gently on her wrist, not gripping, only reminding. "Don't move, don't breathe loud, don't become visible." And then something clicked, a soft metallic sound, like a key turning. Parmentier's eyes sharpened. The abbot was not only in the chapel, he was checking something, checking the stone wall mechanism, the hidden latch. Parmentier felt a cold certainty settle into his chest like a loaded coin. If the abbot knew the passage existed, and clearly he did, then the maid's disappearance was not merely a moment of panic, it was a practiced ritual. The abbot's voice drifted faintly through the stone, not loud, not angry, almost tender. "A house of God," he murmured, "must remain clean." The nun's eyes filled with terror again. Parmentier understood the danger immediately. Men like Gideon Strake were crude, predictable. Their evil stomped in boots. But men like Abbot Alaric, their evil wore language like perfume. Their evil called cruelty mercy. The abbot's footsteps moved again, this time along the chapel wall, then away. Another door creaked, then silence. The abbot had left. Parmentier waited a full minute anyway. Then, carefully, he relit his candle. The flame took shape like a small, reluctant soul. He turned to the nun. "You will show me," Parmentier whispered. Her lips trembled. "I can't." "Yes," Parmentier said, voice soft but iron beneath. "You can. Because what happens next depends on whether you wish to continue living with this sin." The nun squeezed her eyes shut, and a tear rolled down like confession. Finally she nodded. They moved downward. The passage opened into a lower chamber where the air smelled of damp stone and forgotten years. Then Parmentier saw it, a narrow wooden door reinforced with iron bands, not unlike the locked corridor above, but older. The nun held up the ring of keys with shaking fingers. Parmentier pointed. "Which one?" The nun swallowed. "The smallest." She tried 3 keys before finding the correct one. The lock turned with a soft, obedient click. The door opened. Parmentier raised his candle, and his blood turned cold. Inside was a small room, bare stone walls, no windows, only a low cot and a lantern hook. The room was not a torture chamber. It was worse. It was a room designed for disappearance. No violence, no blood, no noise, only silence, only removal. On the cot lay a bundled blanket, and beneath it, a figure, a young woman, her hair messy, her eyes wide, her mouth gagged with cloth. Lisa Morel, alive. Parmentier stepped in quickly, removed the gag. She gasped, then inhaled so sharply it sounded like a sob. "Oh, thank God," she whispered. Parmentier placed 2 fingers gently against his lips. "Quiet. You are safe for the moment." Lisa's eyes darted between Parmentier and the nun. She looked as if she had aged years in 2 nights. "Who is she?" Lisa whispered, pointing at the nun. The nun's voice broke. "I'm sorry." Lisa stared at her with hatred. "Sorry," she hissed. "You left me here like an animal. You—" Parmentier cut in gently. "Not now. Your anger will survive. First, we leave." He turned to the nun. "Is there another exit?" The nun nodded quickly. "Yes, through the library stair." Parmentier's eyes sharpened. "Show me." They moved. Lisa could barely walk, but fear gave her strength. They followed the hidden passage deeper until it split, and there, Parmentier saw the architecture of the Abbey's secrets. It wasn't just one passage, it was a network, a whole skeleton beneath holiness. They climbed a narrow spiral stair that smelled of dust and old wax. As they rose, voices above drifted faintly, monks murmuring prayers, servants moving trays. The Abbey continued its routine, while a human being had been stored underground like a shameful object. At the top of the stair, the nun paused at a wooden wall panel, pressed a hidden groove, and the panel slid open silently. They stepped into the library. Parmentier's mind registered something immediately. The library's candle light was dimmer than before, fewer flames. Someone had reduced light, a small tactical change. Because darkness was useful. Parmentier whispered, "Go! Quickly!" They crossed between shelves, but before they reached the far door, a voice rose behind them, smooth, calm, familiar. "I wondered," the abbot said softly, "how long it would take you." Parmentier froze, not from surprise, but from calculation. He turned slowly. Abbot Alaric stood near the desk, hands folded, expression gentle as a grandfather's, but his eyes were cold. Behind him stood 2 monks. Not the soft, humble kind. These monks had shoulders like doors. The abbot smiled at Lisa. "My child," he said warmly, "you should not wander." Lisa trembled. Parmentier stepped slightly in front of her. "Abbot," Parmentier said politely, "I found your missing maid." The abbot sighed as if disappointed. "This is not your concern." Parmentier nodded. "And yet here I am." The abbot's smile sharpened faintly. "Do you know why I invited you?" Parmentier answered immediately. "To contain the scandal." The abbot's eyes glinted. "Very good." "And," Parmentier added softly, "to discover who helped her hide." The abbot's smile faded. Parmentier continued calmly. "A secret chamber requires keys. A passage requires knowledge. You wanted to know if someone was disloyal." The abbot stared at him. Then he laughed quietly. "Brilliant!" He stepped closer. "I don't enjoy cruelty," the abbot said. "I enjoy order. The Abbey is fragile. One whisper can destroy it." Lisa suddenly screamed, "You're a monster!" The abbot looked at her with mild pity. "I am your salvation," he said softly, "and your prison." Parmentier's voice turned cold. "And Dr. Finch, was he also your order?" The abbot paused, just one pause, but it was enough. Parmentier saw it. Finch had ties here. The doctor didn't just treat villagers, he treated Abbey problems, and Finch likely knew something about the sealed corridor too. Lisa whispered, shaking, "He kills people." The abbot's eyes flicked to her sharply. Silence. Then he smiled again. "Monsieur Parmentier," he said gently, "you will leave. You will forget. And the maid will return to her duties. After repentance." Parmentier's gaze was steady. "No." A small silence fell. For the first time, the abbot's face hardened. "You misunderstand," he murmured. "That was not a request." Parmentier's voice remained calm. "Then you misunderstand, Father." He reached into his coat pocket and produced a small silver object, a whistle. He blew it once. The sound cut through the abbey like a knife. The abbot's eyes widened. From somewhere outside there was immediate movement, shouts, boots, urgent voices. Inspector Holloway, because Parmentier had not come tonight without planning. He had sent a note earlier through a servant he trusted, instructing Holloway to wait near the abbey's gate for the signal. And now the abbey, so confident in secrecy, was about to meet the clumsy violence of law. The abbot's face twisted. "You fool!" he hissed. "You've invited wolves into a church," Parmentier replied quietly, "and you invited a fox to investigate." Chapter 6. A secret staircase in the library. The moment the whistle echoed, the abbey's false calm shattered. Boots thundered in corridors, monks shouted commands, servants scattered like startled birds. The abbot snapped at the two strong monks behind him. "Block the doors!" They moved. Parmentier pushed Lysa behind a shelf, whispering rapidly, "Stay hidden! Don't move! If anything happens, scream!" Lysa nodded, sobbing quietly. The nun trembled, staring at the abbot like a woman seeing hell without fire. Parmentier turned. One of the strong monks lunged toward him, but Parmentier did not fight. He stepped back into the shadow of the shelves, forcing the monk to follow into tighter space where strength was less useful than balance. The monk reached. Parmentier swung his cane, not hard but precisely, striking the monk's wrist. The monk hissed, dropping his grip. Parmentier spun away. He seized the nun's arm. "The stair!" They dashed toward the hidden panel. Behind them, the abbot's voice rose with cold fury. "Stop them!" Parmentier shoved the hidden groove. The panel slid open. They slipped into the staircase. Stone steps spiraled downward like the throat of a beast. Above them came chaos, boots, shouts, doors slamming, but Parmentier was not descending into danger. He was descending into proof. The secret stair wasn't only an escape route, it was the abbey's shame made physical. They reached a landing. Parmentier raised his candle and examined the wall. There, scratched into stone, were names, dozens, perhaps hundreds, some with dates, some with symbols, some with only initials. The nun gasped. "I've never—" Parmentier's voice was grim. "Confession walls, not for God." They moved onward. At the bottom of the stair, a corridor stretched long and narrow, lined with old iron doors. Cells, not monastery storage, cells. The nun began to sob again. This isn't meant to be here." Parmentier's eyes sharpened. "But it is." One cell door had fresh marks, recently used. Parmentier stepped toward it, candle held high. The lock looked newer. He tried it, locked, but the keyhole was scratched recently, as if keys had been shoved in hastily. Then Parmentier saw something that made his stomach tighten. A small dark stain near the bottom of the door. Not candle wax, not mud, something thicker, rust-colored, blood, not old, fresh. Parmentier looked at the nun. "Who was kept here?" The nun shook her head violently. "No one, no one." Parmentier's voice sharpened just slightly. "Sister, enough!" She crumpled emotionally. "I don't know. I swear I don't know. I only handled the maid. Only her." Parmentier stared at the bloodstain again. Then he heard a sound above. Closer now. Boots on stone stairs. Someone was descending. Not Holloway. Different boots. Not chaotic, controlled. The abbot's men. Parmentier grabbed the nun. "We go!" They moved fast through the underground corridor, following it toward the sealed service passage connection. And then he saw it, a carved religious symbol on a stone panel, the Silverpine emblem. This was the heart of it, a sealed door, disguised as sacred wall. Parmentier pressed his hand on the emblem. Nothing. He tried again. Different pressure points. Still nothing. The nun shook her head, panicked. "It only opens with Abbot's ring." Parmentier's eyes narrowed. "Ring?" The nun nodded wildly. "A signet ring. He presses it into the crest." Parmentier exhaled slowly. So the abbey was truly a kingdom, and the abbot carried the key on his finger like a crown. Above them, boots came closer. Parmentier's mind snapped into decision. He turned to the nun. "You will get me that ring." Her face crumpled. You will," Parmentier said, calm but absolute. "Or this will never end. Not for Lisa, not for you. Not for the next girl." The nun trembled, then nodded, tears falling. Parmentier whispered quickly, "Go up. Act obedient. Bring him here. Bring the ring." "But he'll He already has, Parmentier replied softly. Now we make him pay. The nun ran upward, sobbing. Parmentier remained in the underground corridor alone, candle flame trembling. He listened to boots closing in. Then he heard voices, and the abbot's voice, smooth again, controlling fear like music. "Monsieur Parmentier," the abbot called down into darkness, "you cannot win. The abbey will survive you." Parmentier answered quietly, to himself more than to the abbot, "Then I will ensure it survives with truth." Chapter 7. The Nun Who Knows Too Much. Parmentier remained alone in the underground corridor, candle held steady, though the flame trembled like a frightened witness. The stone around him was old, older than the abbey's public prayers. This place was not built for holiness, it was built for control. From above came footsteps, slow, heavy, controlled, not rushed like frightened servants, not chaotic like Holloway's men outside. These were footsteps that belonged to someone who had walked these stairs many times, someone who knew exactly how deep the abbey's secrets ran. And then came a voice drifting down the spiral stairway, calm as silk. "Monsieur Parmentier," Abbot Alaric. "Come now," he called, tone gentle, almost regretful. "You are a clever man. Clever men know when to stop." Parmentier did not answer. He had learned that when a predator speaks softly, it's because it wants you to step closer. A torchlight flickered above, yellow, stronger than candlelight. Shadows danced across the stone walls like nervous spirits. Then the abbot appeared at the top of the lower corridor, framed by the stairs like a figure in a painted mural. Behind him stood the two strong monks again, and beside them, Sister Administrator Elowen. Her face was pale, her hand shook, but what shook Parmentier most was not her fear. It was the fresh red mark across her cheek, a slap, a warning. The abbot smiled kindly at Parmentier, like a father catching a child playing where he shouldn't. "Elowen," the abbot said softly. "Tell him." Elowen swallowed. Her eyes flicked to Parmentier. She began. The abbot's smile tightened. "Speak clearly," Elowen's voice cracked. "I told him about the stone door." Parmentier's gaze sharpened. The abbot nodded as if acknowledging a minor mistake. "Yes, she did." Elowen's lips trembled with shame. "I'm sorry." Parmentier spoke gently. "Elowen, how long have you been sorry?" Her eyes filled with tears. "A long time," she whispered. The abbot's voice turned colder, though it stayed quiet. "Enough theatre," he said. "Monsieur Parmentier, you will hand over whatever you found, any letters, keys, notes, and you will leave this abbey." Parmentier's eyes flicked toward Elowen again. "And if I refuse?" he asked. The abbot sighed. Then he made a small nod. One of the strong monks stepped forward, producing something from his robe. A cloth. And the smell hit Parmentier instantly. Chloroform, not medical grade perhaps, but effective enough. "So, Finch," Parmentier thought, "this is how you work." Quietly, Parmentier raised his cane slightly. "You are not holy men," he said softly. The abbot smiled. "Holiness is a story. Stories are useful." The monk advanced. Parmentier moved, fast, precise. He did not swing the cane wildly. He stepped sideways, let the monk's bulk carry him forward, then struck sharply at the monk's wrist, forcing the cloth to drop. The monk grunted. The second monk lunged. Parmentier ducked, and his cane hooked the monk's ankle. The man stumbled and slammed into the wall hard enough to rattle stone dust. The abbot's eyes widened, not in fear, but annoyance. "Enough!" he hissed. And then, above them, a faraway crash echoed through stone. A door forced open. A voice roared, "Police!" Inspector Holloway's thunder. The abbot's face changed completely. Not panic, not guilt, pure fury, because his kingdom was being invaded. He turned sharply to Elowen. "You brought them!" Elowen shook her head, sobbing. "No, I didn't, I swear." Parmentier saw it at once. Elowen hadn't contacted Holloway. Parmentier had. But the abbot didn't know that, which meant Elowen had become the perfect scapegoat. The abbot lifted his hand. Not to slap her again, to strike her. Parmentier stepped forward instantly. "No!" The abbot froze, staring at him with cold hatred. Then footsteps thundered closer, rapid, chaotic, unstoppable. Holloway burst down the spiral stair with 2 constables behind him, faces hard, batons ready. Holloway's eyes landed on the scene, the monks on the floor, the abbot stiff with rage, Elowen crying. Holloway growled, "What in God's name is this place?" Parmentier pointed toward the sealed crest wall. "The truth." Chapter 8. Midnight footsteps in the cloister. Holloway didn't wait. He marched through the underground corridor like an angry bull, shining his lantern across the iron doors, the scratch marks, the strange carvings, the blood stain. His face turned darker with every step. "This isn't an abbey," he muttered. "This is a bloody prison." The abbot regained composure quickly. "You have no authority here," he said, voice steady. "This is church ground." Holloway laughed. "Ugly. Church ground? Father, I've seen pig farms with more mercy than this." The abbot stiffened. "Watch your tongue." Holloway stepped close. "Watch my warrant." The abbot's eyes flicked to Parmentier. "You're enjoying yourself," the abbot whispered. Parmentier replied calmly, "No, I am correcting something." The abbot's mouth tightened. Then he leaned toward Holloway. "Inspector, this is a misunderstanding. The maid was found. The matter is resolved." Lysa appeared behind a bookshelf above ground, trembling but alive, escorted by a constable. The abbot saw her and smiled faintly, as if her survival proved his righteousness. "You see," he said, "alive, safe, she merely needed correction." Holloway's expression was murderous. "Correction? You locked her underground like a corpse?" The abbot's voice softened dangerously. "Inspector, do not confuse holiness with softness." Parmentier watched the abbot carefully. Even now he wasn't afraid, which meant the abbot believed his final weapon had not yet been used. Then it came, a sound, from above ground, drifting down through stone vents, footsteps, slow, measured, dragging slightly, as if one foot carried weight. Holloway frowned. "What's that?" Elowen's face went pale. "No." The nun who helped Parmentier, Sister Imogen, began to tremble uncontrollably. "He's coming," she whispered. Parmentier's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Imogen's lips shook. "The one who handles the abbey's night work." The abbot smiled faintly. Holloway snapped, "What night work?" The abbot's smile grew. Then above a door opened, and the footsteps came closer. Not running, not hiding, approaching with the calm of someone who believes the abbey is untouchable. Parmentier turned to Holloway. "Inspector, bring the abbot up, now." Holloway obeyed, this time without argument. They climbed, back into the abbey's public world of candle light and stained glass. The cloister courtyard was drenched in fog. Lanterns flickered under arches, and the footsteps, those sinister footsteps, moved across the stone pathway. A figure emerged in the fog, a man in a long dark cloak in his gloved hand, a small lantern. The lantern's hood was partly closed, dimming the flame, like someone who liked darkness. Holloway yelled, "Stop!" The figure paused, slowly removed his hood, and Parmentier's blood turned cold, because he recognized the face, Dr. Soren Finch. Or rather, the man everyone believed was Dr. Finch, but Finch was dead, which meant only one thing. This was the second major sin of Silverpine Abbey, identity theft, a man wearing Finch's face as disguise. The abbot's voice became calm, satisfied. "Inspector," he said softly, "allow me to introduce Brother Calder." The cloaked man's lips curled into a small smile. "Good evening," Calder said. His voice was not Finch's voice, and his eyes were not Finch's eyes. They were darker, sharper, predatory. Parmentier spoke quietly to Holloway. "That's your killer." Chapter 9. The Detective's Trap at Morning Mass. The abbey could not sleep after that. Not with police in the halls, not with servants whispering, not with the abbot's authority cracking like ice beneath sunlight. Holloway ordered Calder detained, but Calder didn't resist. He allowed the constables to handcuff him like a man amused by the idea of law. "You're making a mistake," Calder murmured to Holloway. "Men like me don't belong in cages." Holloway spat. "You'll belong where I put you." Calder smiled. They locked Calder in a guest room under guard, because the abbey's jail-like rooms had become evidence, too compromised to use. Still, Parmentier knew this was not over. Men like Calder did not walk into fog unless they had an exit planned. That night, Parmentier didn't sleep. He sat near a corridor window, watching moonlight touch the stone. At dawn, bells rang for morning mass, and Parmentier's trap began. Mass was mandatory at Silverpine Abbey, not only for faith, but for surveillance. Everyone present, everyone visible. Perfect. The chapel filled slowly, monks in rows, servants at the back. Elwyn near the side aisle, pale and shaking. Liza guarded near the entrance. The abbot at the altar, face calm, voice holy. Holloway and two constables standing rigid in the rear. Calder was brought in last. Handcuffed, guarded tightly, he walked with a slight drag. And Parmentier smiled inwardly. A drag, not natural, performed. The abbot began prayer. "May truth be revealed," he intoned. Parmentier's eyes flicked to the stained glass. Truth. That word tasted different in the mouth of a man who had used silence as a weapon. As prayer continued, Parmentier leaned toward Holloway and whispered, "Watch Calder's left shoe." Holloway grunted but focused. Calder knelt at the same time. Everyone knelt. His cloak fell slightly, and Holloway saw it. A thick sole attachment, a notched heel, a removable printmaker, like Sablewind Pierre's trick. But in an abbey, Parmentier whispered, "Footprints are not only on wood, they're on stone too, if damp." Holloway's face hardened. Parmentier stood suddenly during a prayer, an act so shocking the chapel gasped. The abbot stopped. "Sit down," he snapped softly, venom hidden in holiness. Parmentier raised his voice, not shouting, but projecting like a judge. "I ask only one question," Parmentier said. Silence swallowed the chapel. Parmentier continued. "On the night Lisa vanished, a sealed corridor door was locked, yet something heavy was dragged. The floor was scrubbed, keys moved in secret." He pointed calmly at Calder. "Brother Calder wore false soles to create signature prints and misdirect suspicion. He used solvent to dim lanterns and cloth to silence screams." Calder's smile didn't fade. He only tilted his head. "Interesting story," he murmured. Parmentier turned to the abbot. "And Abbot Alaric ordered it," Parmentier said. The entire chapel erupted. Gasps, whispers, a few sobs. The abbot's face didn't move at first, then he smiled. A smile without warmth. "You have no proof," the abbot said. Parmentier replied gently. "Oh, father." He reached into his coat and placed something on the altar. A ring, the abbot's signet ring, the silver pine crest, Elowin's. Breath hitched in horror. The abbot's eyes widened. Parmentier continued. "Sister Imogen brought it. She confessed. She broke. And she told me something else." Parmentier looked directly at the abbot. "The sealed corridor has been used since 1892, he said, not to protect holiness," and he paused, "but to hide sin." The abbot's face went grey, and for the first time he looked afraid. Chapter 10, The Vanishing Explained, Final Reveal. Holloway moved first. He stormed forward, seized the ring, inspected it, then snapped, "Open the sealed corridor!" The abbot's voice shook slightly. "You cannot!" Holloway roared. "Now!" They marched to the western service corridor, the locked corridor that had haunted the abbey. The chains were removed. The lock turned. The door opened with a groan like something wounded. Inside was darkness, cold, and a smell. Not rot, not death. Worse, old fear. They stepped inside with lanterns raised, a long stone. Hallway stretched forward, narrow and suffocating. Along the walls were hooks, shackles, old bedding, and faint scratch marks, too many, too desperate. Lysa cried out softly. Elowin began sobbing openly. Holloway's face became stone. They reached the end of the corridor, a hidden door, silver pine emblem carved into it. Holloway pressed the abbot's ring into the crest. Click, stone shifted. The door opened, and behind it a chamber, old, forgotten, and filled with relics. Not religious relics. Human relics. Old maid aprons, hair ribbons, buttons, letters, a ring, a rosary broken in half, evidence of women who had vanished, not killed, not buried, erased. Parmentier's voice was very quiet now. "This is why you couldn't call police," he said to the abbot. The abbot's mouth opened, then closed. No prayer came, no excuse, because excuses sounded childish in front of atrocity. Holloway turned on Calder. "You!" Holloway snarled. "What did you do here?" Calder smiled faintly. I cleaned, he said. I carried. I silenced. Holloway's baton twitched like it wanted to strike. Parmentier stepped in calmly. Calder killed Dr. Finch. The abbot jerked his head. No, Parmentier cut in gently. Yes, Father. He looked at Calder. Finch was your physician. He knew about the chloroform, about the underground rooms. He grew guilty. Calder's eyes glinted. Parmentier continued. Finch threatened to go to authorities. You killed him quietly and staged it as a seaside accident, but the problem was not Finch's death. He glanced at the abbot. The problem was Finch's conscience. Could have infected others. The abbot whispered. This was necessary. Holloway slammed him against the wall. Necessary? Parmentier spoke softly, final nail. And Lisa vanished because she saw Finch's medical ledger. Lisa blinked, crying. Yes, I saw papers, names, dates. Parmentier nodded. Those papers recorded sedations, treatments, real bodies. Calder laughed quietly. She was curious. Curiosity is always punished. Elowen screamed, You bastard! Holloway hauled the abbot forward, voice shaking. You will rot, he hissed. You will rot for every girl who vanished. The abbot tried to speak, only breath came, because now, finally, Silverpine Abbey had witnesses, not to prayer, to truth. Final epilogue. Lysa Morell left Silverpine Abbey wrapped in a wool coat, escorted by police. Eyes haunted but alive. Sister Imogen confessed everything and was taken into protective custody, sobbing with relief as if truth were oxygen. Elowen stood at the gate when Parmentier departed. You saved her, she whispered. Parmentier corrected gently. No, the truth saved her. I merely opened a door. Elowen's voice shook. And what about the abbey? Parmentier glanced back at the cold stone spires. It will stand, he said softly, but it will never be able to pretend again. As his car drove away, mist rolled over the abbey's courtyard like a curtain finally falling. And for the first time in many decades, Silverpine Abbey was quiet. Not because it hid secrets, but because its secrets had been dragged into light.